My career-defining project was due in just hours, my home a fortress of focus, until a cheerful doorbell chime shattered the quiet and welcomed the unwitting agents of my professional destruction. The low hum of my workstation was the only sound in the house, a comforting white noise that had become the soundtrack to my life for the past 3 months. My world had shrunk to the dimensions of 3 glowing monitors, a universe of architectural renderings, structural calculations, and endless lines of code. The digital model of the Athenaeum project floated in the center screen, a crystalline structure of glass and steel that I had poured my soul into. This wasn't just a job, it was the competition that could launch my small, independent firm into the stratosphere. The deadline was 8 a.m. tomorrow. I was running on fumes, caffeine, and the sheer terror of failure. My husband, Mark, was at his weekly poker night, a fact for which I was profoundly grateful. I loved him, but his nervous energy and constant questions of, "Are you almost done?" were not conducive to the deep focus I needed. Tonight it was just me, my project, and the ticking clock. The house was a sanctuary. The living room was spotless. The kitchen counters gleamed. I functioned best in order, and my environment was a reflection of the precision I was trying to achieve on screen. I took a deep breath, cracked my knuckles, and prepared to dive into the final, grueling 12-hour stretch. That's when the doorbell rang. It was a sharp, cheerful 3-note chime that felt like a violation of the sacred quiet. I froze, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. A package? At 8 p.m.? I ignored it, hoping they'd just leave it on the porch. But then it rang again, this time more insistent, followed by a loud, booming knock that rattled the door in its frame. A sigh of pure frustration escaped my lips. Every second counted. I saved my work, stood up, my back screaming in protest, and padded to the front door, peering through the peephole. My blood ran cold. It wasn't a delivery driver. It was my sister-in-law, Chloe, grinning from ear to ear, her face a mask of predatory cheerfulness, and she wasn't alone. Behind her, spilling onto my manicured lawn, was Mark's entire immediate family. His brother, Tom, their 2 boisterous kids, and his parents, all holding coolers, bags of chips, and what looked like a portable karaoke machine. My sanctuary was under siege. I opened the door a crack, my body language a clear, "Do not enter" sign. "Chloe, what are you guys doing here?" Her smile widened, as if my bewilderment was the most charming thing she'd ever seen. She pushed the door open, forcing me to step back. "We were just talking about you. Mark mentioned you've been chained to that desk for weeks." She breezed past me, her cheap perfume an assault on my senses. The rest of the horde followed her in, their loud chatter and stomping feet echoing through my pristine hallway. "You look so pale from that computer," she announced to the room, turning to me with a look of mock pity. "We came to give you a party tonight, to save you from yourself." I stared at her dumbfounded. The sheer audacity was breathtaking. "A party? Chloe, you can't be serious. I have a deadline. It's the most important deadline of my career, and it's in less than 12 hours. She waved a dismissive hand, already directing her husband Tom to set up a folding table in my living room. "Oh, stop being so dramatic. A little break will do you good. You need to relax, live a little. All work and no play makes Jill a dull girl, right?" she said, winking at her mother-in-law, who nodded in fervent agreement. "I'm not being dramatic," I said, my voice rising with a tremor of panic. "This isn't a game. This project is my future. You guys have to leave. Please." My plea was met with laughter. They genuinely thought I was being a killjoy. Tom was now plugging a massive speaker into the wall outlet next to my entertainment center. The kids were running through the house, their sticky fingers already leaving prints on my glass coffee table. My mother-in-law, Martha, headed straight for my kitchen. "Don't you worry, dear," she called over her shoulder. "I'll get the snacks organized. You just sit down and try to have some fun for once." I felt like I was in a nightmare. These people, my husband's family, were dismantling my carefully controlled environment with a joyous, thoughtless abandon. I grabbed my phone to call Mark, to tell him to call off his hyenas, but Chloe snatched it right out of my hand. "No, no, no," she tut-tutted, wagging a perfectly manicured finger in my face. "No work calls, and no calling the fun police." She giggled, referencing Mark. "This is a surprise for him, too. He'll be so happy to come home to a party instead of you hunched over like a gargoyle." My heart hammered against my ribs. Desperation began to curdle into a hot, simmering rage. My life's work was on the line, and they were treating it like a cute little hobby I needed to be rescued from. I backed away from them, toward the relative safety of my office, the one room they hadn't yet breached. "Fine," I said through gritted teeth, my voice dangerously low. "Do what you want, I have to work." I shut the office door, the click of the latch doing little to muffle the sudden deafening blast of pop music that erupted from the living room. The bass vibrated through the floorboards, shaking my desk, rattling the very bones in my body. I tried to focus, to block it out, but it was impossible. The clear, precise lines on my screen seemed to wobble in time with the beat. Shouts of laughter, the shriek of the kids, the clinking of bottles. It was a cacophony designed to break my concentration. I put on my noise-canceling headphones, but I could still feel the vibrations. It was a physical invasion. I worked for another 20 minutes, my progress slowed to a crawl, my anxiety spiking with every thud of the bass. Then, the smell of something burning wafted under my door. I ripped off my headphones and ran out. One of the kids had put a bag of microwave popcorn in for 6 minutes instead of 2. The kitchen was filled with acrid smoke. As Martha fanned the smoke detector with a dish towel, Chloe's husband Tom, in a moment of brilliant stupidity, decided the best way to plug in the karaoke machine was to unplug the multi-socket power strip it was next to make room. The power strip that was right below my desk on the other side of the wall. Back in my office, all 3 of my monitors went black simultaneously. The low, comforting hum of my workstation died. A profound, terrifying silence fell, a silence far more deafening than the party music had ever been. A cold dread, sharp and painful, pierced through my chest. My main computer, my backup drive, my entire digital universe, all of it was connected to that one power strip. I slowly, mechanically, knelt down beside my desk, my eyes tracing the thick black cable that snaked from my surge protector, through a hole in the wall and into the living room. My gaze followed it to the wall socket, where it now lay limp and disconnected on the floor. And plugged in its place, blinking with festive, malevolent little lights, was the power cord for their karaoke machine. For a moment, nobody moved. The house was utterly silent, save for the faint, acrid smell of burnt popcorn. My gaze was locked on that karaoke plug, a gaudy plastic monument to my own personal apocalypse. I could feel their eyes on me, their party mood momentarily deflated by the sudden darkness in my office. They saw a technical glitch. I saw the smoldering ruins of my career. "Oops," Tom said with the casual indifference of a man who has just spilled a drink. "Must have knocked the wrong one. Sorry about that." He bent down, fumbling with the cables. A sound ripped from my throat, a choked guttural noise that was halfway between a sob and a scream. I shoved past him, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grasp the thick cord of my power strip. My fingers felt like clumsy sausages. I jammed the prongs back into the socket with a savage thrust. The karaoke machine died. My surge protector flickered to life with a reassuring green light. "Hey," Chloe protested from the living room, "we were about to start." I didn't answer her. I scrambled back into my office, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. I stabbed the power button on my computer tower. The fans whirred, a blessed sound, a sign of life. But it was just the beginning of the ordeal. A forced shutdown like that. It could corrupt anything. Everything. "See? It's coming back on," Tom said, peering over my shoulder, his beery breath fogging the air around my head. "No harm done. Computers are tough these days." I wanted to hit him. I wanted to scream at him until my throat was raw. Instead, I channeled every ounce of my focus onto the screens as they flickered to life. The boot sequence felt agonizingly slow. The loading bar for the operating system crept across the screen at a glacial pace. Each second was a new twist of the knife in my gut. Chloe had started the music again, this time from a portable Bluetooth speaker, the tinny sound grating on my already frayed nerves. "Is it working, dear?" Martha called from the kitchen, her voice dripping with a cloying, false concern. "You really should have a proper surge protector for that important work of yours." My surge protector, the one they had just unplugged, was a top-of-the-line model that had cost me over $300. The words died on my lips. Arguing was a waste of breath, a waste of precious time. Finally, the desktop appeared. My custom wallpaper, a serene image of the Norwegian fjords, looked like a mockery. I held my breath and double-clicked the icon for the architectural software. The program began to load. Another eternity passed. The splash screen stared back at me, unblinking. Come on, come on, come on. The family had gathered in the doorway of my office, a silent, clueless audience to my private horror movie. They were watching me, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and impatience, as if waiting for the pre-show entertainment to finish so the main event, the party, could resume. The software finally opened. My project files were listed in the recent panel. I clicked on Athenaeum Project Final V9.dwg. My finger trembled as it pressed down on the mouse. The loading wheel appeared, spinning, 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 and then it stopped, and a small gray box appeared in the center of my screen. Drawing file is not valid. My blood turned to ice. I clicked OK. I tried again. Same result. My hands flew across the keyboard, navigating to the file directory. I tried to open the autosave backup. File corrupted. I tried the .back file. Cannot be opened. It was all gone. 3 months of work, thousands of hours. The last 12 hours of non-stop, frantic, caffeine-fueled progress, gone. Vanished into the digital ether because Tom wanted to sing a drunken rendition of Don't Stop Believin'. A low, keening sound escaped my lips. I leaned forward, my forehead resting on the cool surface of my desk. The vibrations of the bass from the living room speaker pulsed against my skull. "What's wrong?" Chloe asked, her voice sharp with annoyance. "Is it broken? Honestly, you spend so much on this stuff, and it's so flimsy." I lifted my head slowly and turned to face them. The carefully constructed dam of my professionalism, of my desire to keep the peace with my husband's family, finally broke. A tidal wave of pure, undiluted rage washed over me. "It's not broken," I said, my voice eerily calm. "It's gone. The file. My project. Everything I've been working on for the last 3 months, it's gone because you unplugged it." Tom paled slightly. "It's just a file, isn't it? Isn't there a copy somewhere?" "A copy?" I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that held no humor. "Yes, Tom, there's a copy. My cloud service backs up my work automatically." I could see the relief wash over their faces. Chloe even rolled her eyes, as if I'd been making a fuss over nothing. "But it only syncs when the file is successfully saved and closed," I continued, my voice dropping to a whisper. "Or at best, once every few hours. All the work I did today, all the final critical adjustments, the renderings that have been processing for the last 6 hours, that's gone forever." "Well, you can just do it again, can't you?" Chloe said, crossing her arms. "You have all night." The sheer, staggering ignorance of that statement short-circuited my brain. I stood up, my chair scraping harshly against the floor. "Get out," I said, my voice trembling with fury. "Excuse me," Chloe scoffed. "We came here to help you." "Help me?" I shrieked, the sound echoing in the small room. "You came here and you smoked out my kitchen. You let your kids smear filth all over my house. And you destroyed my career, all so you could get drunk and screech into a microphone. You haven't helped. You have destroyed. Now get out of my house. All of you." There was a stunned silence. Even the tinny music seemed to falter. Martha gasped, clutching at her chest in performative shock, but Chloe's expression hardened. Her eyes narrowed into slits. "You know what? I think you're overreacting. Mark is always saying how stressed you get. Maybe this is a good thing, a sign that you need to quit this little hobby and focus on being a wife." That was it. That was the final straw. Before I could respond, my mind, in a moment of sheer, panicked clarity, latched onto one last desperate hope: the off-site server. My firm maintains a secondary, deep archive server that syncs on a different protocol. It's slow, it's archaic, but it's built for disaster recovery. It takes a snapshot of the entire system drive every 24 hours, at midnight exactly. My eyes darted to the clock on my monitor. It was 8:47 p.m. The last snapshot would have been from last night. I would still lose today's entire workday, but the core project, the foundation, might be there. It was a sliver of a chance, but it was all I had. I turned back to my computer, my fingers flying as I typed in the server address for the remote access portal. The login screen appeared. My heart pounded. This was it. I typed in my username and password and hit enter. An access window popped up, but it wasn't the file directory I was expecting. It was a single line of stark, red text. System-wide lockout initiated. Unlock requires two-factor administrative approval. Current administrators on record. Jillian Miller, Mark Davis. The red text glowed on my screen. A final insurmountable barrier. Two-factor administrative approval, me and Mark. The system was designed for ultimate security. In case of a major breach or catastrophic failure, no single person could authorize a system-wide restore. It was a fail-safe I had helped design, a sensible precaution that had just become a noose around my neck. Mark was at poker night. He never answered his phone when he was playing poker. It was a sacred rule. The one night a week he was unreachable. My breath hitched. I needed him. Right now. I needed him to tap an approve button on his phone, a 5-second action that stood between me and total professional ruin. "What is it now?" Chloe's voice cut through my haze of panic, sharp and impatient. She had crowded behind me again, her cheap perfume making me gag. "Did you forget your password?" I whirled around in my chair, my eyes blazing. "I need Mark," I said, the words coming out as a desperate rasp. "I need him to approve the remote access. His phone." Chloe let out an exaggerated sigh. "I told you, we're not bothering Mark. He deserves one night of fun without you calling him about some work emergency." She exchanged a look with her mother. "This is exactly what we were talking about. You're completely obsessed. You can't even handle a tiny little computer problem without calling your husband to come rescue you." "A tiny problem?" I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. I stood up, slowly, deliberately. I was taller than her, a fact I rarely use to my advantage, but right now I felt like a cornered animal. "You have 10 seconds to get your family and your karaoke machine out of my house. If you are not gone by the time I count to 10, I will call the police." Tom, who had at least the decency to look sheepish, started gathering his kids. "Come on, Chloe, let's just go. This has gotten out of hand." But Chloe didn't move. She planted her feet, a smirk playing on her lips. It was a look I knew well. The look that said she had decided she was the wronged party here, the benevolent sister-in-law whose kind gesture had been cruelly thrown back in her face. "You wouldn't dare," she said. "What would Mark think, you calling the cops on his family?" "One," I began, my voice as cold and steady as I could make it. I picked up my office phone from the desk. "You're being hysterical," Martha chirped, wringing her hands. "Just calm down, dear." 2. I held the receiver in my hand. 3. Chloe's smirk faltered. She glanced at Tom, who was already hustling their crying children towards the front door. "Fine," she snapped. "Fine, we'll leave. I'll be sure to tell Mark how you treated us, how you flew into a psychotic rage over a stupid computer file." She grabbed her purse and stormed out of the office, purposefully knocking a stack of papers off my desk as she went. I didn't flinch. 4, 5, 6. I could hear them scrambling in the hallway, the chaotic sounds of a hasty retreat. Coolers banging against door frames, mumbled curses, the front door slamming shut with a window-rattling boom. 7, 8, 9. Silence. Blessed, absolute silence. They were gone. I dropped the receiver back into its cradle and sank into my chair, my body trembling with adrenaline and despair. The quiet I had craved all night now felt vast and empty. I looked at the clock. 8:53 p.m. My window of opportunity was shrinking with every second. I grabbed my cell phone, the one Chloe had taken from me earlier. My hands were still shaking as I pulled up Mark's contact. I knew it was futile, but I had to try. I pressed call. It rang once, twice, 3 times, and then went to voicemail. "Mark Davis, you know what to do." I hung up without leaving a message. I texted him. "Emergency. I need admin approval for server. Call me now." I added a string of exclamation points for emphasis. I knew he wouldn't see it until his game was over, probably after midnight. By then, it would be too late. The deadline would have passed. I would have nothing to submit. Years of building my reputation, of sleepless nights and sacrificed weekends, all for nothing. I buried my face in my hands, trying to think, who else was at that poker game? Dave, Mark's best friend. He sometimes checked his phone. I scrolled through my contacts and found his number. I dialed. He answered on the second ring, his voice loud over a background of laughter and clinking chips. "Jilly, what's up? Everything okay?" "Dave, thank God," I gasped, relief making me dizzy. "I need you to do me a massive favor." I need you to give the phone to Mark. It's a huge emergency." There was a pause. I could hear him cover the receiver, his muffled voice talking to someone. Then he came back on the line. "Sorry, Jill. He's in the middle of a huge hand. He said he'll call you when he's done. He's got his poker face on, you know how he gets." "No, Dave, you don't understand," I pleaded, my voice cracking. "I don't have time. This isn't a joke. You have to drag him out of there if you have to. My career is literally on the line." Whoa, calm down," he said, his tone shifting from friendly to placating. "Look, Chloe just texted the group chat. She said you guys had a little fight and you're freaking out over some computer glitch. Mark saw it. He said to tell you to just take a deep breath and that he'll help you with it when he gets home." My stomach dropped. Of course she did. She'd gotten her story in first. She'd painted me as the hysterical, overreacting shrew. Mark wouldn't see the urgency. He'd see his sister's text, hear my frantic voice, and assume I was just having a meltdown. He'd handle it when he got home, like one handles a toddler's tantrum. "Dave, she's lying," I said, trying to keep the desperation out of my voice. "She and her entire family came over, unplugged my entire workstation, and corrupted months of my work. This is the only way to get it back. Please, just hand him the phone." "Look, Jill, I can't," he stammered, clearly uncomfortable. "It's a $200 buy-in. I can't interrupt the game like that. Mark would kill me. He'll be home in a few hours. I'm sure it'll be fine." And with that, he hung up. I stared at my phone, the dial tone buzzing in my ear. He'd hung up on me, betrayed not just by my in-laws, but by my husband's best friend, and by my own husband. He saw a text from his sister painting me as unhinged, and he believed her. He chose his poker game over my frantic pleas for help. The rage was back, cold and sharp this time. Fine. If my husband wouldn't help me, if he was going to leave me to drown, then I would find my own way to shore. I stood up and walked into the kitchen, my movements stiff and robotic. The smell of burnt popcorn still lingered in the air. I looked at the mess they'd left behind: open chip bags, spilled soda, a half-eaten dip congealing on my granite countertop. And in the middle of it all, sitting on the counter, was the key to my salvation, or my revenge. I wasn't sure which, yet. It was Chloe's purse. In her dramatic, storming exit, she had forgotten it. My eyes narrowed. I thought about her smug face, her dismissive words. Focus on being a wife. I walked over to the purse, a ridiculously expensive designer bag that I knew for a fact was a knockoff. I didn't hesitate. I unzipped it and tipped the contents onto the counter. Lipstick, keys, a wallet, gum, and her phone. I picked it up. It was unlocked. Chloe never bothered with a passcode. Her entire life was an open book of social media posts and group chats, and that's when I saw it. A new notification at the top of her screen. It was a group chat, and the name of it made my blood run cold. It was called Operation Save Jillian. Operation Save Jillian. The words stared up at me from the cracked screen of Chloe's phone, a sickeningly cheerful banner for the demolition of my life. My mind reeled. This wasn't a spontaneous, misguided act of kindness. This was premeditated. This was a conspiracy. My fingers, slick with a cold sweat, tapped on the notification. The group chat opened, and the story of my ruin was laid bare in a scrolling timeline of texts, photos, and laughing emojis. The group consisted of Chloe, her husband Tom, her parents, and, my heart sank to my shoes, Mark. My husband. The chat history went back 2 weeks. Chloe. Mark is so worried about Jillian. Says she hasn't left her office in days. Literally sleeping on a cot in there. Martha. Poor thing. She works too hard at that little computer hobby of hers. A woman needs balance. Mark. I just wish she'd take a break. The competition ends Friday. Maybe we can all do something Saturday to celebrate? Chloe. Saturday is too late. She'll have a nervous breakdown by then. We need an intervention. Operation. Save Jillian is a go. I scrolled, my breath catching in my throat. They had planned it all. The timing, the surprise party, the snacks. There was even a photo of the karaoke machine in the store, posted by Tom with the caption, "Nothing cures workaholism like some off-key Bon Jovi." Mark had replied with a laughing emoji. He hadn't just known about it, he had encouraged it. He had supplied them with the information they needed to time their ambush perfectly. He knew poker night was the one night I was guaranteed to be alone, deep in the zone, with no one to run interference. He had set me up. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't his family's thoughtless blunder. This was his. He had complained to them about my work, about my dedication, framing my ambition as a pathology that needed to be cured. He had sicked his family on me, knowing full well what they were like, knowing they would create chaos. He might not have intended for them to unplug my computer, but he had lit the fuse. He had created the exact circumstances for this disaster to happen. And his message to Dave, tell her to take a deep breath, wasn't just dismissive. It was the condescending pat on the head of a man who had gotten exactly what he wanted. Proof that I couldn't handle the pressure, that I was hysterical, that my little hobby was too much for me. The worst part was the text Chloe had sent to the group just minutes ago, after she had stormed out of my house. Chloe, you guys will not believe this. Jillian went completely psycho. I think we broke her. She was screaming and throwing things and called the cops on us. Martha, oh my goodness. Is she all right? Is the house okay? Tom, she's nuts. Total meltdown over a file. I think she's in way over her head with this job. Then the message that stopped my heart. It was from Mark. Mark, Jesus, is she okay? Did you guys get out of there? I'm on my way. Game's over. He was coming home. Not because I had called in a panic, not because my career was imploding, but because his sister told him I had gone psycho. He was coming home to manage the situation, to handle his hysterical wife. A cold, hard clarity settled over me, displacing the hot rage. The grief and panic solidified into a diamond-hard resolve. They thought I was broken? They hadn't seen broken yet. I looked at the clock. 9:15 p.m. Mark would be home in 20, maybe 30 minutes. I didn't have time to mourn my project. I didn't have time to mourn my marriage. I had time for action. I looked at Chloe's phone, still open to their vile group chat. An idea, wild and audacious, sparked in my mind. Chloe's phone was a treasure trove. She was the administrator of the family's cloud storage account, their social media, their smart home devices. Her life was on this phone, and she had left it on my counter. I went back to my office. The red text still glowed on my monitor. System-wide lockout requires two-factor administrative approval. I needed Mark's phone, but I didn't have it. What I had was Chloe's phone, and Chloe's phone was logged into the family's mobile carrier account. My fingers flew across her screen. It took me less than a minute. I went into the account settings for their family plan. I found Mark's phone number, and with a few taps, I initiated a SIM swap. I reported his phone as lost or stolen and instructed the carrier to immediately transfer his number and all services to a new, unactivated SIM card. I had a dozen of them in my desk drawer for work phones. It was a long shot, a desperate hack, but the system was mostly automated. If it worked, for a short window of time, Mark's phone number and any texts or authentication codes sent to it would be routed to a burner phone in my possession. His own phone would become a brick. I popped the new SIM into an old phone, powered it on, and waited. It felt like an eternity. I was playing with fire. What I was doing was probably illegal, but they had torched my life's work. A little fire seemed like a perfectly proportional response. The burner phone chimed. It had connected to the network. Mark's number was now my number. I went back to my computer, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I initiated the server access request again. The system sent the two-factor authentication code. One pinged my own cell phone, which I approved instantly. The second, the one meant for Mark, was now heading towards the burner phone in my hand. My breath caught. The burner chimed. A text message with a 6-digit code appeared on the screen. My hand was rock steady as I typed the code into the authentication field on my monitor and hit Enter. The red text vanished. It was replaced by a screen full of folders and files. The deep archive. It was there. The snapshot from midnight last night. The core of my project was safe. A wave of relief so profound it almost brought me to my knees washed over me. I had lost a day's work, a critical, punishing day's work, but not everything. I could still make this work. It would be a brutal, caffeine-fueled race to the finish, but I had a fighting chance. I immediately started the massive file transfer to my local drive. As the progress bar began its slow crawl, I heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. Headlights swept across the front window of my office. It was Mark. He was home. I stood up and walked to the front door, the burner phone clutched in my hand. I was no longer the frantic, pleading woman from an hour ago. I was someone else entirely. Someone who had seen the full depth of the betrayal. I opened the door just as he was putting his key in the lock. He looked surprised to see me. His face was a mask of practiced concern. "Jilly?" "Oh, thank God. Chloe called. She said things got out of hand. I am so sorry. I never meant for this to happen." "I know what you meant to happen, Mark," I said, my voice devoid of all emotion. I held up Chloe's phone, the screen still glowing with their group chat. His eyes widened, the color draining from his face as he recognized it. "And I know that you were on your way because you thought I'd had a psychotic break, not because the project you pretended to support was destroyed." He opened his mouth to speak, to lie, to spin some story, but I didn't give him the chance. I held up the burner phone. "You're probably wondering why your phone isn't working," I said, my voice as cold as ice. "It's because your number doesn't belong to you anymore. It belongs to me." He stared at the phone, then at me, confusion warring with dawning horror on his face. What are you talking about? What did you do?" "I saved myself," I said simply. Then I looked past him, into the darkness of the driveway. Another car had just pulled in behind his, its headlights cutting through the night. It was Chloe's car. She had realized she'd left her purse and had come back to get it, and probably to deliver another dose of condescending pity. She got out of the car, her face a thundercloud of righteous indignation, and started marching towards us. "Oh, good," I said with a thin, cruel smile. "The whole family's here. This will be much more efficient." I took a step back into my house, leaving the front door wide open. "Get in," I said to Mark, my voice leaving no room for argument. "Both of you, we have some things to discuss, starting with the new terms of your access to your bank accounts, your credit cards, and your digital lives, all of which, as of about 5 minutes ago, are under new management." Mark stumbled into the house like a man in a dream, his face a pale, slack mask of disbelief. Chloe followed, her angry stride faltering as she took in the scene me, calm and composed in the doorway, her husband utterly shell-shocked, her phone in my left hand and a strange burner phone in my right. "What is going on?" she demanded, her voice lacking its usual confident bluster. "Is that my phone? Give it back." "In a minute," I said, shutting the front door behind them and locking it. The click of the deadbolt echoed in the sudden, tense silence. "First, you're both going to listen. You can stand, I'm going to sit. It's been a very long night." I walked back to my office, not waiting to see if they followed. I sat in my chair, the comforting glow of the file transfer progress bar on my monitor, a beacon of hope. They hovered uncertainly in the doorway, a pair of thwarted bullies, their power dynamic completely upended. "I read your group chat," I began, my voice even and measured. "Operation Save Jillian." A charming title for a premeditated campaign of sabotage disguised as a family intervention. I looked directly at Mark. "You fed them my schedule. You knew the poker game was my biggest crunch time. You painted my ambition, the very thing you used to say you admired, as a mental illness. You didn't want to save me, Mark. You wanted to humble me." Mark flinched as if I'd slapped him. "Jilly, no, that's not... I was just worried about you. You were so stressed. You weren't sleeping." "I was stressed because I was on the verge of the biggest accomplishment of my life." I cut him off, my voice like steel. "Something I built from the ground up, with my own 2 hands and my own brain. And you couldn't handle it. You couldn't handle being the husband of a woman who might be more successful than you. So you and your merry band of idiots decided to put me in my place, to remind me that my real job is to be a wife. Right, Chloe?" Chloe flushed a dark, ugly red. "We were just trying to get you to relax. It's not our fault your stupid project is so fragile." "My project isn't fragile," I said, leaning forward. "My marriage, however, appears to be made of spun glass." I picked up the burner phone. "This phone now controls Mark's number, and with his number, I have access to the 2-factor authentication for everything. Our joint bank accounts, our credit cards, our investment portfolio. Your phone, Chloe, gave me access to your family's cloud account, which contains, among other things, scanned copies of your passports, your birth certificates, and the password manager you so foolishly sync across all your devices. In the last 10 minutes, I've locked you both out of everything. Your digital lives now run through me." The color drained from Chloe's face. Tom, I realized, was still sitting in her car in the driveway, probably wondering what was taking so long. He was the lucky one. "You can't do that," Mark finally sputtered, finding his voice. "That's illegal. That's theft." "Is it?" I tilted my head. "Or is it asset protection? You deliberately and with premeditation created a situation that caused me significant financial and professional damages. I'm merely securing what's mine. Consider it a lien against my future earnings, which you so spectacularly tried to incinerate tonight." I turned my attention back to the monitor. The file transfer was complete. My project, or at least the version from last night, was safe on my hard drive. A deep, shuddering breath of relief escaped me. The worst was over. Now for the cleanup. "Here's what's going to happen," I announced, swiveling my chair back to face them. "Mark, you are going to transfer half of the liquid funds from our joint savings account into my personal business account. Right now. I will send the authentication code to this burner phone, and I will watch you do it from your banking app, which I will graciously allow you to access for the next 5 minutes." "Half?" he choked. "Jilly, that's for the damages," I said flatly. "For the all-nighter I'm about to pull to fix your family's mess. For the hit my reputation will take if I'm even 1 minute late with this submission. It's my hazard pay. After that, you're going to pack a bag and go stay with your sister. Your key is no longer welcome here." "You're kicking me out." His voice cracked. He looked genuinely wounded, the clueless architect of his own misery. "You left this marriage long before I locked the door," I said, my heart a cold, heavy stone in my chest. "You left it when you decided to conspire with your family against me instead of talking to me." I turned to Chloe. "And you are going to text your entire family in that same group chat, and you are going to tell them the truth. You will write, and I will dictate. I am so sorry, Jillian. Our surprise party was a terrible and destructive idea. I personally unplugged her computer, and I take full responsibility for the damage and distress I caused. You will then add that you will be paying for a professional cleaning service to undo the filth your children left in my house." Chloe stared at me, her mouth agape. "I will not." "You will," I said calmly. "Or the next thing I'll do with my newfound digital omnipotence is email your husband's boss a very interesting series of screenshots from your girls' night out photo album on your cloud drive. I'm sure he and his wife would be fascinated to learn about Tom's business trip to Vegas." Checkmate. Chloe's face went from crimson to ashen in a split second. She snatched her phone from my desk, her hands trembling as she began to type my dictated message. Mark, looking utterly defeated, took out his own phone and with my guidance completed the fund transfer. A notification pinged on my laptop. The money was in my account. "Good," I said, standing up. "Now get out." They left without another word. I watched from the window as they got into their respective cars, a silent, miserable tableau under the streetlights. I didn't feel triumph. I just felt a vast, hollow emptiness where my marriage used to be. Then I turned back to my office. The clock on the monitor read 9:58 p.m. I had 10 hours. The house was finally quiet, a true sanctuary once more. I put on a pot of coffee, tied my hair back, and sat down at my workstation. The digital model of the Athenaeum project filled my screens. It was damaged, incomplete, but it was there. It was mine. I started to work. The lines of code, the architectural renderings, the structural calculations, they welcomed me back like old friends. As I poured what was left of my soul into the project, fueled by caffeine and a righteous fury, I rebuilt. I didn't just restore the lost work, I made it better. The anger and betrayal sharpened my focus, giving my design an edge, a clarity it hadn't had before. At 7:45 a.m., 15 minutes before the deadline, I hit submit. I didn't win the competition. I came in second. But the firm that won immediately offered to acquire my company, citing my grace under pressure and brilliant last-minute design innovations. The offer was more than I had ever dreamed of. I was no longer a small, independent firm. I was a force to be reckoned with. I sold my house, the one filled with too many bad memories. Mark filed for divorce, a quiet, uncontested affair. I heard through the grapevine that Chloe and Tom were having problems. Apparently, secrets have a way of coming out. Sometimes Late at night, in my new minimalist city apartment, overlooking the skyline I now helped to shape, I think about that night. They called it Operation Save Jillian. And in a way, they were right. They did save me. They just never realized that what I needed saving from wasn't my ambition. It was them.